Shred here. This will be our final video on guitar chords. In this video we will cover the minor chord. By lowering the middle note of any major chord we create a new sound quality, to add to our basic knowledge of the guitar. Let's go back to Mr. Nyman, to begin our first minor chord.
Alright, let's talk about minor chords. Today we're going to start with E minor. Now the reason I use the line over the M is to signify minor and show you that it's a lowercase m. I will always do that. I've done it since I started learning about minor chords. To make a minor chord, we're actually going to do with what we know. We're going to talk about major chords again. And let's just put down E major because that's what we already know. E major is E, G sharp, and B. That sounded like this. Now remember what we talked about with the sharp. Remember the sharp raised a note to make the E major chord sound the way it was supposed to sound. For a minor chord, we're now going to take that sharp away. And what you do to get a minor chord is we're going to flat, or flat is actually the opposite of sharp. If sharp was to raise it a half step, we're now going to lower the middle note of a major chord to get a minor chord. So we're going to take that E major chord, E, G sharp, B, and we're going to change it to E, G natural B. So we're going to remove that sharp. So the E minor chord only has 3 notes just like the major chord, and we're going to remove the middle, or not remove the middle note, but lower the middle note, or remove the sharp that is on that middle note. What does that look like on the fretboard? Well, if this was our E chord, we're going to lower the note that was that G, which is this one right here, and we're going to make that an open string. We just lowered it a half step, which means 1 fret. And otherwise, just like the other E chords, we're going to play all the other strings open. Our first finger is going to go here on the A string in the 2nd fret, and our second finger is going to go on the D string in the 2nd fret. Let's see how the E minor chord is played. All right, minor chords. For minor chords, we're going to start with our E minor chord. Now, obviously, that is very similar to our E chord. So for E minor, remember, the way you form a minor chord is by flatting the middle note of the triad. So it's kind of going to work here on the guitar in the same fashion. So remember our E chord, which was 2, 3, 1, first finger being on the G chord or the G string, our second finger being on the A string, and our third finger being on the D string. We're now going to flat that first finger. We're actually going to take it off, and now we just have 2 and 3 on the 2nd fret of A, and then the third finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, and you strum all 6 strings. Now I'm playing it right now 2 and 3, but you can also play it with your 1st and 2nd finger. Okay, either way works. You can even do 3, 4 if you want. Any fingering works. It changes based on what song you're playing at that time. So E minor. Alright, our next minor chord we're going to talk about is A minor. Now let's do what we did with our E minor chord. Let's take what we know about the A major chord and make it minor. Here's our A major chord. A, C sharp, E. Remember, here's what that sounds like. And remember what we talked about, that we're going to remove that sharp because that lowers that middle note by a half step to make it an A minor to sound like this. Now on the fretboard, if this was our A chord, we're now going to lower the note that was C by a half step. This note was the C right here, and we're going to lower it a half step, which is only 1 fret. So we're going to move that note down 1 fret. Now, you'll see this on the guitar when I play it, but it's hard to move that finger behind those fingers when you're playing the A minor, the A chord to the A minor chord. So we're going to change our fingering. We're going to put our first finger here on the B string in the 1st fret, and then move our second finger out here to the D string in the 2nd fret, and our 3rd finger there on the G string on the 2nd fret. Now notice this looks a lot like E major, but E major is over that way 1 fret. Sorry, not 1 fret, 1 string. It's over that way. So we're not going to play it over there. We're going to play it down 1 string for A minor. Now this is a 5-string chord, just like our A chord and our A7 chord. So we're going to make our A string open, our skinny open, and we're not going to play that first E string. Let's see what A minor sounds like. A minor, very similar to our A chord. Again, we're trying to move one of the notes down a half step. So we're actually going to take what our 3rd finger is here on the A chord. Here's our A chord. We're taking our 3rd finger and we're going to move it down a half step. Now that's kind of impossible to get it past my 2nd finger. But if I went 2, 3, 4 like we talked about in the A chord, I can then take my 1st finger and put it on the same string that pinky's on, that B string. So my 1st finger goes on the B string, my 2nd finger goes on the D string, my 3rd finger goes on the G string, and I only strum 5 strings for this, so I skip my 1st string and I have my A minor chord. The last minor chord we're going to talk about is D minor. Now let's remember what the major chord for D was. It was D, F sharp, and A. Remember what that sounded like? Now, knowing what we know about minor chords, we're going to take that middle note and we're going to flat it, or lower it, or take away the sharp, because a flat cancels out a sharp, making it a natural note. So we have D, F natural, and A. Sounds like this. So if this was our D chord, that was the pattern of our D chord, we're now going to lower a note. We're going to lower the F note. The F sharp note rather. This is the F sharp right here, and we're going to lower that by a half step. So we're going to put our, and we have to change our fingering up a little bit because this is very hard to do in the same fingering as D minor. So we're going to put our 1st finger on the E string, 1st fret, our 2nd finger on the G string, 2nd fret, and our 3rd finger on the B string, 3rd fret. Just like our other D chords, we're going to keep, we're only going to strum 4 strings, and we're going to keep our A string and our fat E string with X's over them so we don't play them. Here's our D minor. Let's see how that's played. The last minor chord we're going to learn is D minor. Now, taking our D major chord, which we've already talked about, in the 4-string chord with our fingers on the bottom 3 strings. Remember, we need to flat the middle note, and the middle note of the D minor chord is actually held in our 2nd finger. Now, it's kind of hard to flat that middle note because that 1st finger is in the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch our 2 fingers, and we're going to slide our 1st finger to the 1st fret. So that makes our 1st finger on the E string, our 2nd finger on the G string, 2nd fret, and our 3rd finger on the B string in the 3rd fret. Remember, we're only going to, just like our other D chords, we're only going to do 4 strings, so skip the top 2 strings, and D minor.
Let's review. A minor chord is created by lowering the middle note of any major chord by a half step. Thank you for watching this series of videos on guitar chords. Please tune in next time for our next topic for guitar, rhythm and strumming. Thanks for rocking out with me.